You know what they say about old trappers?
I know what they say about old trappers.
Old trappers never die, they just smell that way.
Yeah, right.
1 minute.
The Montana wilderness has always been a place of mystery, silence, and untamed beauty. Towering pines, deep snow, and rugged mountains create a landscape that feels both majestic and isolating. It is the kind of place where life is hard, where survival requires skill, patience, and respect for the land. For decades, Tom Oar, known to many from the reality series Mountain Men, lived a life that seemed to embody everything the frontier promised: hard work, self-reliance, and a peaceful existence far removed from the modern world. Tom's cabin, tucked deep into a remote valley, was a symbol of that life. Smoke would rise from its chimney, signaling to neighbors that the man who had spent decades living among the wilderness was still alive, tending his fires and caring for his animals. For years, his presence was a comforting constant, a reminder that even in the harshest environments, humans could adapt, thrive, and coexist with nature. However, one cold autumn, that reassuring presence vanished. Days turned into weeks with no sign of smoke, no sound of dogs barking, and no footprints in the snow. Concern among the local community grew quickly, shifting into fear as the silence stretched longer than any of them could remember. Rangers, prompted by this unusual quiet, decided to investigate, unaware that what they were about to uncover would shock them and change the way the valley was remembered forever. When the authorities first arrived at Tom Oar's property, the sight that greeted them was unsettling. Snow covered the ground, knee-deep in places, and a biting wind swept through the trees. His truck, normally parked by the cabin, lay buried under ice and snow. The dogs, loyal companions that had once roamed freely around the property, were nowhere to be seen. Most concerning of all was the cabin's front door, usually tightly secure with a hand-carved wooden bar. It now hung slightly open, an unusual oversight for a man who had spent his life mastering survival and safeguarding his home. Stepping inside, the first ranger was immediately struck by the oppressive stillness. The cabin was dark, silent, and icy, as if time had stopped within its walls. Dust hung in the air, giving the faint impression of smoke, and an odd metallic scent lingered, mixing the smell of rust and the forest. Every detail of Tom's life was exactly as he had left it. A deer hide remained stretched on a frame. His handmade knife glimmered on the table, and a mug containing frozen coffee sat untouched. On the wall, a calendar marked October 3rd with a red circle, frozen in time. A scrap of leather beneath the knife bore the words, "Keep the fire alive," hinting at the man's dedication, foresight, or perhaps a message for someone else. Despite searching every corner, including trapping gear, attic space, and the supply shed, the rangers found no signs of struggle or any footprints leading away. The cabin felt like a snapshot frozen in the wilderness, a place abandoned suddenly but intentionally, leaving the rangers with more questions than answers. Then, as they examined the floor near the wood stove, they discovered a hidden hatch that Tom had never mentioned in any known designs. When opened, a rush of cold, damp air escaped, carrying the scent of pine resin and earth. A staircase descended into darkness, revealing boxes wrapped in animal hide and sealed with wax, labeled with faded markings spanning decades. The discovery suggested that Tom had been hiding something, carefully cataloging his secrets, and perhaps preparing for something far beyond what anyone could have imagined. As the rangers continued their investigation, the mysteries deepened. Flashlights revealed meticulously carved planks and wooden beams beneath the hatch, while the boxes contained leather-bound journals dating back to 1972, years before Tom became a known figure on Mountain Men. Each journal bore a hand-carved symbol, a circle split by a single line. The entries began innocently, describing seasons, weather patterns, and hunting trails, but gradually, the content took a disturbing turn. References to strange lights in the sky, humming sounds through the trees, and voices carried by the wind began to appear. Some pages were smudged, as if touched by tears or rain, while others were torn out entirely. One journal even bore a bullet hole. Sketches within the journals depicted shadowy figures with elongated limbs and glowing eyes among the trees, often coinciding with unexplained events reported in the valley. The rangers felt a growing unease, as if the very cabin had absorbed a presence that could not be explained by science or common experience. A folded parchment sealed in red wax carried a chilling note. If you're reading this, it's already too late. That night, As a generator sputtered and lights flickered, the team heard 3 slow, deliberate knocks from beneath the floor. When the hatch was closed and they stepped back, the warmth around it remained, as if whatever was beneath continued to exist, alive and aware. The property was sealed that night, leaving the rangers and locals with only speculation and fear. Weeks later, strange occurrences in the Yak Valley amplified the mystery. Residents reported the woods around Tom's cabin no longer felt alive. Wildlife vanished. Deer avoided familiar paths. Wolves no longer roamed freely. A trapper named Bill described a low, drawn-out howling sound at midnight, unlike any animal he had ever known, metallic and chilling. Hikers experienced flickering flashlights, malfunctioning compasses, and faint blue lights moving between the trees. Reports of guttural screams and strange symbols carved into trees resembling the marks in Tom's journals spread throughout the valley. Despite official explanations attributing the phenomena to natural causes, locals refused to accept the statements. Unmarked vehicles, federal agents, and black SUVs began appearing quietly, sealing off access to the cabin and the surrounding forest. Evidence, including journals and mysterious objects, was removed, and the underground hatch was permanently filled with concrete. The secrecy only fueled local speculation that Tom had stumbled upon something ancient, powerful, and beyond human comprehension. Many believed the journals were not just notes but warnings, hints at forces the world was never meant to discover, and that whatever Tom found might now be unleashed. Months after the official investigation and government intervention, the valley surrounding Tom Oar's cabin remained eerily quiet, yet life there felt fundamentally changed. The snow eventually began to thaw, revealing the rugged terrain beneath, but the silence that had settled over the area was no longer natural. Local residents spoke of a weight in the air, a heavy tension that made even the simplest walk to the forest feel unnatural. The once familiar paths seemed different, almost as if the wilderness itself were watching anyone who dared to step foot near Tom's property. Determined to uncover answers, a small private team of former park rangers and volunteers who had known Tom for decades quietly entered the valley, ignoring official no-trespassing signs and government restrictions. Their goal was simple: to see for themselves what could cause such widespread fear, to investigate the cabin and its surroundings for clues that the authorities had either missed or intentionally removed. They brought with them tracking dogs, thermal imaging drones, and metal detectors, well prepared for a thorough search. The cabin itself, untouched since the federal closure, stood silent and imposing, frost creeping along its seams as if guarding its secrets. As the team approached, the dogs began to grow restless, sniffing the air and barking at points invisible to human eyes. The moment they stepped onto Tom's property, an odd static seemed to hum in the air, subtle yet unmistakable, making radios and electronic equipment behave unpredictably. Every step felt heavier than the last, and the team could feel the atmosphere thickening, charged with a presence that was both palpable and disturbing. Despite the cold and snow, a sense of anticipation, almost dread, hung over the valley, as if the land itself was aware of intruders probing its hidden depths. The team's first task was to examine the area around the cabin and the hatch that had been filled with concrete. They noticed traces of old tracks partially hidden by melting snow, matching the shape of Tom's handmade boots. The trail was faint, frozen in time, and led deep into the woods. With hearts pounding, the search team followed it, hoping to uncover clues that might explain the strange events and the disappearance of one of Montana's most legendary wilderness experts. The trail wound through twisting pines, icy ravines, and steep hills, forcing the team to move cautiously. The forest was unusually quiet, no bird song, no rustling of small animals, and even the wind seemed subdued, as if holding its breath. Along the path, the team came across a massive pine tree, its bark scarred with a carving that sent chills down their spines. Etched crudely but unmistakably were the words, "The Wild Remembers." Beneath it hung a small leather pouch, tied with sinew, the same type Tom used for storing his fire-starting tools. Inside the pouch were strange items: a stone knife, a strip of animal hide covered in symbols identical to those his journals, and a tiny shard of metal that seemed to pulse faintly when touched. Holding it, the team members felt a subtle vibration, as though the object were alive in some way, resonated with the energy of the land itself. The shard emitted a faint blue light when the sun struck it, a glow so subtle it could easily be missed, yet unmistakably present. The team's leader pocketed the shard for later analysis, intending to study it further once they returned to a safer environment. But almost immediately, a strange phenomenon occurred. All satellite phones lost signal simultaneously. Radios buzzed with static, and a low, resonant sound began to roll across the frozen river nearby. The noise was rhythmic, like a heartbeat, deep and rolling, distinct from wind or any animal the team had encountered. The dogs refused to move, whining and clawing at the snow, sensing a danger the humans could not yet understand. As the team observed the frozen riverbank, one of the men reported seeing a figure standing on the opposite bank. It was tall, motionless, and clothed in shadow. When they blinked or looked away, it disappeared, leaving only a deep sense of unease. Panicked yet compelled to continue, the team gathered their equipment and decided to retreat, leaving the forest and cabin behind, but taking the shard with them. That night, the man who had taken the shard reported it began humming faintly on his desk, glowing softly before fading again. He called the others in a panic, but the call abruptly ended, and when they checked on him the next day, he had vanished. His cabin door was wide open, a cup of coffee steaming on the table. Eerily reminiscent of Tom Oar's disappearance decades earlier, the shard remained behind, silent once more, and when officials later retrieved it, the case was quietly classified, buried under restricted evidence. Locals continue to whisper about the strange phenomena around the valley. They claim that on quiet winter nights, if you stand near the frozen river and listen closely, you can still hear a slow, steady heartbeat emanating from the wilderness, along with a faint voice carried on the wind, repeating the words Tom had scrawled on his cabin wall. Keep the fire alive. Whether the shard, the journals, or the cabin itself contained a remnant of some ancient force, a government secret, or an unexplainable natural anomaly, no one has been able to provide a conclusive answer. For the people who live near the valley, the land remains alive in a way that is both mesmerizing and terrifying, a place where the line between reality and the unexplained continues to blur, and where Tom Oar's story stands as a chilling reminder of the wilderness's enduring secrets. In the weeks and months following Tom Oar's disappearance, the mystery of his cabin gained a life of its own, spreading far beyond the small Yak Valley community. Fans of mountain men, wilderness enthusiasts, and curious locals all speculated about what could have driven such a skilled, experienced man to vanish without a trace. While official reports remain frustratingly vague, describing the events as an environmental anomaly, whispers throughout the valley painted a far more unsettling picture. Residents reported that the area around Tom's cabin no longer behaved as it had for decades. Animals that had roamed freely in the forest suddenly avoided the land, and even common wildlife seemed to sense a presence they could not explain. Hunters and hikers described strange phenomena that went far beyond ordinary wilderness experiences. Compasses spun wildly when near the property. Flashlights flickered unpredictably, and drones sent to map the area often failed without explanation. Unmarked black SUVs and mysterious vehicles frequently patrolled the roads, while federal agents and personnel in hazmat suits were observed setting up monitoring equipment deep in the forest. Locals claimed these teams worked quietly, leaving no trace except a sense of constant surveillance, as though the land itself were being watched or protected from human interference. Stories began to circulate about low, resonant sound that rolled through the valley at night, guttural and rhythmic, resembling a heartbeat that seemed to come from beneath the ground. One old trapper, Bill, described the noise as metallic and unnatural, unlike anything he had ever heard in decades of living in the wilderness. The hum, static, and strange lights seen by residents contributed to an atmosphere of unease that no one could easily dismiss. Some locals believed Tom had uncovered something ancient, perhaps a relic or presence buried deep beneath the forest floor. They speculated that the man had acted as a guardian, keeping the secret of the cabin from the world, and that his disappearance might have been deliberate, a voluntary withdrawal to protect others from forces beyond understanding. Others theorized that the government, aware of the potential danger, intervened to remove the evidence and seal the hatch permanently with concrete, creating a buffer between the public and whatever lay below. No official explanation satisfied the community. The secrecy, the mysterious vehicles, and the abrupt cessation of public access only intensified speculation. Even casual visitors to the valley reported feelings of oppression, an almost physical heaviness in the air, and an unnerving sensation of being observed. Over time, a mythology began to form around Tom Oar and his cabin. Residents spoke of ghostly lights in the forest at night, an orange glow hovering above the tree line where no fire should burn, and the occasional silhouette of a lone figure moving through the snow. Some described hearing whispered phrases carried by the wind, the same words Tom had left on his cabin wall. "Keep the fire alive." These experiences, shared among neighbors, hikers, and former colleagues, created a network of stories that blurred the line between folklore and reality. Meanwhile, researchers, historians, and enthusiasts who managed to gain access to restricted documents or recovered items speculated about the journals and metallic shard Tom had left behind. The journals, with their meticulous handwriting and increasingly frantic entries, appear to document encounters with forces or phenomena far beyond ordinary wilderness experiences. Reports of glowing orbs, strange figures, rhythmic hums, and disturbances in the forest suggested a presence that could influence both the environment and human perception. The metallic shard, which glowed and pulsed faintly when touched, added a tangible element to the mystery, raising questions about whether Tom had discovered an object of natural, artificial, or unknown origin. Attempts to analyze it in laboratories yielded inconclusive results, as if the shard resisted explanation, defying the scientific methods used to study it. Each discovery and sighting reinforced a belief among locals that the wilderness, as wild as it appeared, had changed permanently. It was no longer merely a habitat for animals and a retreat for humans seeking isolation. It had become a landscape imbued with secrets, energy, and intelligence. Whether this was a result of Tom's actions, natural phenomena, or something entirely unexplainable remained a subject of endless debate. What united the stories, however, was the acknowledgement that Tom Oar had lived differently from anyone else. He had been attuned to the land in ways that most could not comprehend, observing patterns, documenting oddities, and preparing meticulously for situations far outside the ordinary. The journals, carvings, and objects he left behind seemed to indicate a level of awareness about forces hidden beneath the mountains that went beyond survival, touching something ancient, powerful, and mysterious. In the years that followed, the legend of Tom Oar's cabin continued to grow. Local folklore emerged with first-hand accounts, government secrecy, and the unexplained phenomena reported by anyone brave enough to approach the valley. The story of the man who lived among the mountains disappeared without a trace, and left behind warnings and artifacts created a chilling reminder. The wilderness does not forget. It holds secrets, sometimes within reach, sometimes buried, waiting to be discovered by those daring enough to look, but always at a cost. Tom Oar's cabin, his journals, and the shard became symbols of that cost, representing both the awe-inspiring and terrifying power of nature and a mystery that may never be fully solved. To this day, the Yak Valley remains quiet, beautiful, and formidable, a place where the wild remembers, where the legacy of Tom Oar lingers, and where the question of what lies beneath the frozen forest continues to haunt those who seek answers as time passed. The story of Tom Oar and his cabin became increasingly enshrouded in secrecy and speculation. Officially, the government insisted that the valley had been closed off due to environmental anomalies and safety concerns. Yet locals remained skeptical. They recalled the sudden arrival of unmarked vehicles, the rapid setup of monitoring equipment, and the presence of agents in hazmat suits, all working quietly yet efficiently, as though containing something far beyond ordinary hazards. Word spread quickly about the cabin's underground hatch, now filled with concrete, permanently sealing whatever lay beneath. The details that had emerged before the sealing, the journals, the metallic shard, the strange carvings, were enough to convince anyone who knew Tom that something extraordinary had been hidden in that remote part of Montana. Some believed that the government had removed a dangerous artifact or evidence of phenomena that defied human understanding, while others suggested that the wilderness itself had been the source of the unusual events. The locals, particularly those who had known Tom for decades, insisted that he had discovered something ancient, a presence that the valley had been guarding for centuries. As the story circulated beyond the region, enthusiasts and paranormal researchers began visiting the outskirts of Yak Valley, hoping to catch a glimpse of the unusual lights, hear the mysterious sounds, or find traces of Tom's legacy. Yet almost all who attempted to venture too close reported an overwhelming sense of being watched. Electronics failed inexplicably. Compasses spun in circles, and GPS devices lost signal, reinforcing the belief that the area was somehow off-limits to ordinary human observation. Tales of strange sightings, both during the day and at night, became increasingly consistent. Truckers passing through the valley claimed to see dim orange glows above the tree-line, a phenomenon that appeared campfire-like but burned without smoke or warmth. Others spoke of lone figures moving silently through the snow, an old man walking deliberately along the frozen riverbank. Many reported hearing faint whispers carried on the wind, repeating the phrase Tom had etched on his cabin wall. Keep the fire alive. For those who had known him, the words were not merely mysterious. They were a warning, a message that the wilderness, though silent, remained alert and capable of remembering every action taken within it. Researchers who managed to gain access to metallic shard or fragments of the journals described them as puzzling and highly unusual. The shard's faint blue pulsing light defied conventional understanding, and its vibrations seemed responsive to human interaction. The journals revealed a man meticulously documenting the inexplicable, glowing lights that hovered silently above the forest, strange figures moving through the trees with reflective eyes and elongated limbs, and rhythmic sounds that reverberated through the ground. Some pages were smudged with what appeared to be blood. Others were torn or sealed with wax, creating a sense of deliberate secrecy. The tone of the writing shifted over time from routine wilderness notes to accounts of phenomena so bizarre that even seasoned experts found them difficult to interpret. It was as if Tom had not only observed the wilderness, but had begun interacting with it on a level that transcended ordinary survival. Those who studied the journals noted that the entry suggested an understanding of forces that might not belong to this world, with references to lights that breathed, shapes that didn't move like men, and an energy beneath the earth that responded to human presence. The implications were unsettling. The wilderness was not merely alive in a biological sense, but possessed a form of intelligence or awareness. Despite the passage of years, the Yak Valley maintained an aura of foreboding. Residents and visitors alike reported that even during the day, the area felt charged, the air heavy and tinged with an almost electrical tension. Hunters avoided old trails. Hikers turned back before reaching the cabin's vicinity, and wildlife continued to behave strangely, as though sensing forces unseen. Local legends began to evolve, blending Tom's story with broader folklore about the mountains, spirits, and forces that guard the wild. In towns nearby, stories circulated about people who had ventured too close and returned with tales of eerie humming, strange footprints, or objects that seemed to shift when left unattended. Some claimed the land itself was alive, that it had memory, intention, and were beyond human comprehension. At the center of all these tales was the enduring mystery of Tom Oar. Had he simply vanished, becoming part of the wilderness he had so loved and understood? Or had he uncovered something so powerful and inexplicable that it demanded silence, secrecy, and even intervention from authorities? The truth remained elusive, hidden beneath layers of snow, concrete, and government control, but the legacy of the man and his discoveries persisted. Each strange sound, every flicker of light, and the faint whisper in the wind reminded locals that the wild did indeed remember. Tom Oar's cabin, now sealed and erased from maps, had become more than just a physical location. It was a symbol of humanity's encounter with the unknown, a chilling testament to the power, mystery, and intelligence of the wilderness, and a cautionary tale about the limits of human understanding when faced with forces far greater than oneself. The ripple effect of Tom Oar's disappearance extended far beyond the Yak Valley, influencing not only the local community, but also sparking conversations across Montana and even reaching national audiences. Fans of mountain men and outdoor survival enthusiasts debated fervently on forums, social media, and podcasts, speculating about the events that led to the cabin's sealing and the man's mysterious vanishing. While government reports insisted on environmental anomalies, insiders hinted at far more complex explanations, including phenomena that defied conventional science. Some suggested that Tom had stumbled upon an ancient artifact buried deep within the valley, something left behind long before human settlement, with properties that could affect both the land and anyone who approached it. Others posited that the metallic shard, glowing faintly and vibrating in response to human contact, might have been a fragment of unknown origin, possibly extraterrestrial, or a remnant of natural forces previously unrecognized by science. Locals, however, often viewed these theories with a mix of awe and fear, insisting that the valley itself had become alive, a living entity that remembered intrusions and responded accordingly. Hunters, trappers, and hikers continued to report inexplicable phenomena, unusual footprints that appeared overnight, lights moving to the forest without discernible sources, and sounds echoing across the mountains that could not be attributed to wind, animals, or geological activity. Those who dared approach the cabin even months or years after the initial disappearance often returned shaken, speaking of a heavy, charged atmosphere that seemed to monitor their movements. Electronics failed unpredictably, drones crashed or lost connection near the cabin, and compasses spun wildly in the presence of certain objects or areas, reinforcing the sense that the land itself was protective, or perhaps even hostile, toward intruders. Some residents believed that Tom had acted as a guardian of the valley, aware of forces that demanded secrecy, and that his disappearance was a deliberate act to shield the community from something beyond understanding. Others worried that the forces he had encountered remained active and possibly even growing in influence, given the ongoing reports of abnormal activity. Beyond the local legends, professionals in fields ranging from environmental science to folklore and anthropology weighed in on the case. Those who managed to examine portions of the recovered journals noted the meticulous records of unusual occurrences, ranging from low-frequency hums and rhythmic vibrations in the earth to sightings of glowing orbs and shadowy figures with reflective eyes. The tone of the writing suggested an escalating awareness, as if Tom himself had come to understand that the forces he documented were not simply natural phenomena, but something intentional and observant. Analysts debated whether the journals were purely descriptive or whether they included coded warnings, instructions, or even a form of communication intended for those who might follow in his footsteps. The presence of physical artifacts, including the metallic shard and the leather pouches containing symbols matching those in his journals, suggested a tangible element to the mystery, proof that what Tom had encountered was real and not merely a product of imagination. At the same time, the government's secrecy added fuel to the speculation. Residents reported unmarked trucks, black SUVs, and federal personnel monitoring the valley, removing evidence and enforcing restrictions. Some theorized that the government had taken extraordinary measures to contain a hazard or prevent the public from discovering phenomena that could challenge conventional understanding. Others believed that the activities were a combination of environmental preservation and the containment of something that was alive, intelligent, and potentially dangerous. The combined effect of these events, the disappearance, the journals, the artifacts, and the persistent reports of unexplained phenomena, created a local mythology that grew more elaborate over time. Stories circulated of people seeing faint glows hovering above the forest at night, hearing rhythmic, heartbeat-like sounds rolling across the valley, and feeling a subtle but undeniable pressure in the air, as if the land itself were aware of their presence. Some claimed the valley seemed to pulse, its energy intensifying in response to human activity, while others reported hearing whispers carried by the wind, echoing the words Tom had left behind. Keep the fire alive. These accounts, while anecdotal, were remarkably consistent across multiple observers, reinforcing the idea that the wilderness had changed irrevocably and that whatever Tom had discovered remained active, hidden, and alive. Despite official reports labeling the case closed and citing environmental anomalies, it became clear that the true story of Tom Oar's cabin was far from resolved.